Now, moving on, I think it would be natural to discuss Yuna in detail. However, I would like to talk next about Auron. And the reason being is that Auron is the linchpin between these two worlds and these two characters that provoke, the story and Yuna's pilgrimage into this new direction. Auron traverses these two realms, and in a lot of ways is almost the man behind the curtain pulling the strings, which is usually a trope actually reserved for antagonists, such as Garland in Final Fantasy IX. So we come to see Auron as someone who's not only fulfilling a promise he made to Jack and Braska, which is really actually quite a slightly disingenuous reason for his accompanying them, but he's almost utilising these characters to help fulfil his personal vendetta against the church. And that's not to say that Auron's bad or manipulative, but he is certainly a man who plays things close to the chest. And when you have impulsive juveniles such as Tidus and Yuna accompanying you, it's safe to say that you can't really tell them your entire plan open and honestly, because they probably go off and do something stupid or, preempt the whole thing and ruin it. Now, Auron fulfills the archetype of the wizened elder, but also epitomises the stereotypical kind of cool reserve and haunted past sort of character that stands alongside, Vincent Valentine, Amarant Coral, and Shadow. But again, fulfilling a stereotype doesn't necessarily equate to something being bad or repetitive, and Auron is a favourite among many simply because he carries this disposition and this stereotype so well. His presence provokes a lot of guesswork early on, as the player is left kind of wondering how he could possibly, be both in Tidus' Zanarkand, join the party, in Spira. And I think the ability of the scenario writer to make him both a man of few words and at the same time the guy calling the shots once he joins the party is actually, really quite genius. Auron is obviously a very cool presence to have around in this otherwise young and really quite impulsive group. But what I like most about him is the maturity of his character when compared with his own backstory, that kind of transpires in spheres and flashbacks. It would have been very easy for Auron to simply appear as the stoic kind of grizzled elder of the group, but through these flashbacks we kind of see him as a young impulsive guardian for Lord Braska, and how his stubborn adherence to the rules and regulations of Yevon is almost on a par with Waka. He is completely unreceptive of Jecht and recoils at the thought of doing anything against, or at least not looked upon lightly in the eyes of Yevon. And it's flashbacks such as these that make the plot of Final Fantasy X so compelling, because it takes a long time for the player to find out how Auron gets from that young man to the brooding old man that, if nothing else, is completely indifferent to Yevon, in the contemporary events of the game. The Auron we come to see is the result of years of travelling, planning, and embitterment as an unsent, and that's been packaged down and repressed into this very stoic, quiet demeanour. And it's actually really impressive, to think of how much Auron must be holding in, which his very presence in Spira, as an unsent speaks volumes for. So I think as a character and as a plot, it's just all the more rewarding in terms of how this character is delivered, and ultimately I think he kind of really holds this game together in a lot of places where we would otherwise just sort of have a main party of characters who, even kind of the more stoic, mature ones such as Lulu and Kamari, they in their own way still exemplify these moments of juvenility or indecision that it would be quite hard to put up with any degree of consistency. So finally, actually, just a note of Auron being an unsent, there are numerous hints throughout the game to this, which I didn't initially get. I'm sure many did, but I didn't on my first playthrough. So there are bits like Seymour asking him, "Why are you here?" And it seems kind of out of place in the context, and you're kind of left thinking perhaps it's a mistranslation, but that later kind of unfolds. And then perhaps slightly more obviously, which I still didn't get on my first playthrough, was where you visit the Far Plane at Guadasalam, and Auron refuses to enter, stating that he doesn't belong there. So yeah, I found that really kind of interesting, those hints, and I'm interested to know if anyone else picked up on it first time around, because I really didn't get it. So finally, just turning to kind of Auron's design, I think the aforementioned tropes of this kind of quiet, reserved character are packaged really quite well in his sort of pseudo Ronin attire. And it's worth noting that this overtly Japanese dress code inexplicably works really well with those sunglasses that he's decided to wear. And also, finally, I suppose we could consider this in the aesthetics, is the voice acting. And to contrast quite starkly with Tidus, I also think that the voice actor Matt Mackenzie does a great job in delivering Auron's kind of brooding dialogue, and it just fits perfectly well with every other physical aspect of this character and his backstory. So, in all, Auron is a fantastic contribution and integral character to the machinations of Final Fantasy X's story. He's responsible for bringing the two love interests and two worlds together, and bridging this generational divide between the absent fathers and their children.